Hi, COM 1160, week 12. This is video number 2. In video number 1, I went over the due dates and some course completion plans with you. If you haven't listened to video number 1, please do so that you know the various due dates and the options that are available to you. In this video, we're going to talk about the final draft and the steps that you'll need to take in order to prepare your final draft for submission. Final drafts should be a no-stress situation. This is your showcase. That puts a lot of pressure on you to tell you that a particular piece of writing that you're doing is your showcase or your brag piece means that you'll probably take it very seriously. But it's important not to stress and to take your time as you're working through a final draft so that you can actually submit your very best work. Given all the time and effort that you put into your research project, from the very first steps where we gathered the material and summarized it, through to the outline and the first draft, you want to make sure that this final draft represents your best work. This requires taking the time to revise and edit your paper carefully. I should warn you that it is quite possible to have done very well in an outline and a rough draft and not do as well on a final draft if you don't carefully edit and revise. So the standard for assessing a final draft is much higher. The bar is much higher than it is for a first draft or for an outline. Because again, this is the piece that you're presenting as your ultimate work. You're going to be taking your first draft and you're going to be revising and editing it into perfection. Let's talk about the different things that you'll need to review. And I will be giving you a handout with all of this information. So please don't feel that you need to capture this or write this down. You will have a separate file. The first thing that you want to do is an organization review. You know by now, having worked with me since January, that I like to do things in chunks. The first chunk of editing that I always do is an organization review. And this is a kind of broad picture review. I want to look at how I've organized the essay as a whole. And then I want to look at each paragraph and I want to see how I've organized the paragraphs. At the essay level, the first thing I want to do is I want to make sure that my introduction moves clearly from the beginning down to the thesis statement. I want to make sure that each of my body paragraphs has a clear main idea that relates to the thesis and has a topic sentence. And then I want to look for main ideas in the body paragraph to make sure that they flow in logical order. And if I need to, I want to edit or revise topic sentences or transitions to make the overall flow of ideas clearer. Finally, I want to look at my conclusion to make sure it summarizes my main ideas and somehow revisits my thesis. I then want to take a look at each paragraph, okay, especially the body paragraphs. And I want to make really sure that the topic sentence clearly states the main idea. If it doesn't, I'm going to rewrite it. Then I want to look at the details in the paragraph. And again, I want to make sure that those relate to the main idea. If they don't, I'm going to revise and make some changes there. And then I'm going to take a look at each of the sentences and see if I need to recast them or rewrite them, or if I need to add in any kind of transition to improve the flow of the sentence as it moves through the paragraph. That's step number 1, the organization review. I then want to take a look at cohesion, and cohesion is how everything fits together. So I want to make sure that the opening of my paper clearly connects to the broader topic and my thesis. I want to make sure in my body paragraphs that I've included support from research for each of the main ideas that I'm discussing. I want to make sure, if I'm using direct quotations, that I've included introductory material before moving into the quotations. Remember again that quotations should never stand alone in a paragraph. They always need to somehow be integrated into your sentence. I want to make sure that the paraphrased and quoted material that I've used develops my points. Okay, so I'm not just including research for the sake of including research. The stuff that I've picked actually really helps to develop the ideas. If I need to, I'm going to add to or revise parts of the paper to help the reader understand how certain information from a source is relevant. So I may need to do some explaining there. I also want to take a look, though, to see if there's any places where I've overused material from sources. And this is especially true when it comes to direct quoting. Remember that we always aim to paraphrase rather than direct quote. So if I have a lot of direct quotes in my rough draft, one of the things I want to do is remove some of those and add in paraphrasing instead. And then I want to make sure that my conclusion makes sense based on the rest of the paper. I want to make sure that any new questions or suggestions that I've made in the conclusion are clearly linked to earlier material. The next chunk that I want to look at is a style review, and that's how I've actually written. Okay, so we've looked so far at organization, the structure of the essay. We've looked at cohesion, which really deals with the kind of content and the way the content fits together. A style review is where I actually look at how I've written. So I want to make sure that I've avoided excessive wordiness, and I also want to make sure that my sentences are varied in length and structure. I want to also make sure that I've avoided using first-person pronouns such as I and we, that I've used the active voice whenever possible, that I've defined specialized terms that might be unfamiliar to readers, and that I've used clear, straightforward language whenever possible, and I've avoided unnecessary jargon. My paper states point of view, if point of view is included, using a balanced tone, so neither too indecisive nor too forceful. Next up, I want to do a grammar, mechanics, punctuation, usage, and spelling review. So this is the actual nuts and bolts of my writing. I want to make sure that my paper is completely free of grammatical errors, such as errors in subject-verb agreement and sentence fragments. I want to make sure that I don't have errors in punctuation and mechanics, so watch for things like misplaced commas or incorrectly formatted source titles. Check your spelling, okay? Proofread your paper for spelling in addition to using the spell checking feature, because again, Word does not always catch everything. I want to make sure that I check my paper for any editing errors that I know I personally tend to make frequently. So if you know from the revising academic writing assignment that we did that your particular weakness is apostrophes or your particular weakness is commas, make sure that you go back and you look specifically for those things, okay, so that you catch any kind of issue. Finally, and I know this is a lot of checking and these are a lot of chunks, but the last thing I always do is a final APA review. I want to make sure that in the body of my paper that every fact or idea that's taken from a source is credited to the correct source. Be careful, okay? Remember that you need to include in-text citations for any information. I was pretty gentle with this on the rough drafts. I will be brutal with it on the final drafts. You want to make sure that each in-text citation has the author's name, or where applicable, the organization name or source title, and the year of publication. You want to make sure that you've used the correct format for in-text and parenthetical citations. Remember that each source that's cited in the body of your paper must have a corresponding entry in the references section. Your references section includes the heading, references, and is double-spaced and alphabetizes entries. You want to make sure that each entry in your references section is indented on the second and all subsequent lines. You want to make sure as well that each entry in your references section has all of the necessary information for that source type in the correct sequence and format. So you want your APA to be letter perfect. You want to include a title page, again, formatted according to APA rules, and you want to make sure that you include your running head. Again, if you're using the APA template, this is done for you, but if you're setting up on your own, you want to make sure that the margins of your paper are set at 1 inch, that the text is double-spaced, and set in a standard 12-point font. That's Times New Roman or Arial. Once you've done all of these different checks, and again, this is going to take some time, okay, because you're going to go chunk by chunk and look at different things each time you pass through the paper. I would say that your last step should be reading the paper aloud. When you read the paper aloud, you'll hear different issues emerge that you may not necessarily notice as you're just looking on the screen. I always print out a copy and read it aloud, and I'm amazed that I do catch little things that I missed on screen. When you're putting it together in terms of format, your final draft needs to contain an APA title page, the body of your essay, so that's the introduction, the body paragraphs, and the conclusion, and an APA references page. Once everything is perfect and you've looked it over a million times, it's going to be time for you to submit it to Blackboard for assessment. I know you've worked really hard on this project. This final draft is your last opportunity to show everything that you've learned about your topic. Please try to enjoy the process as much as you can. This is your very last big piece of writing for COM 1160. I'm really looking forward to reading your essays. Next week, we're going to talk about the final assessment, and I'll give you some instructions and some information about our very last assignment for COM 1160. I'll talk to you then.